now available in paperback and e-readers. Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. The goddess next door takes on the threat of a deadly digital diva driven to destroy the world in this action-packed, all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess featuring a bonus pin-up and the other 2 books in the Cyber Goddess saga at online bookstores everywhere today. One of my viewers wanted to know what my thoughts were regarding the Batman storyline Knightfall. Now, Batman Knightfall is an iconic storyline that took place in the 1990s, where a new villain, Bane, basically breaks open all Arkham Asylum and lets all the inmates out to wear Batman down, and as Batman is fighting all of these inmates who have escaped Arkham Asylum, what Bane hopes to do is eventually have a confrontation with Batman, and eventually at the end of that confrontation, what happens to Batman is as he's worn down, he has a confrontation with Bane, and this confrontation leads to the iconic moment where Batman's back is broken over his knee by Bane, who winds up breaking the bat. And as a result of him breaking the bat, what happens with Batman is that Bruce Wayne is no longer able to be Batman, and his apprentice John Paul Valley, also known as Azrael, has to become the new Batman. And this takes place over the course of, I think, about late 1992 to 1993, because eventually the entire Knightfall storyline winds up ending at about late 1994. I have several of the issues in the storyline Knight's End and some in Knight's Quest, but I wasn't able to buy Knightfall because I really wasn't that too into Batman like that at the time, and I was more into Marvel characters like Iron Man and the West Coast Avengers, but I did check out books here and there as related to the Knightfall storyline. But what I saw in the Knightfall storyline wasn't really that impressive to me, because I've seen far better storylines like the return of Barry Allen Dunn in Wally West Flash book. Again, that storyline is fantastic. But when it comes to Knightfall, I basically saw it as just another derivative, deconstructed superhero story that basically rips off a far better story in Captain America No More / The Captain. Now, the late Mark Gruenwald did a fantastic job of deconstructing Captain America in his 1986 to 1988 story, Captain America No More / The Captain, where the U.S. government looks to take control over Steve Rogers as related to him being Captain America, and looks to take over control of him as related to his operations as Captain America, and Steve Rogers basically decides to relinquish the Captain America costume so that he can maintain his freedom and still go out here being the kind of hero he wants to be. Now, this whole story was basically done because the late Mark Gruenwald got letters from readers telling him that Captain America should act more like 1980s action heroes such as Rambo or Joe the American Ninja, and be more aggressive about taking on villains and looking to even possibly kill villains by being able to do things like decapitate people by throwing Captain America's mighty shield. And Mark Gruenwald, when he was alive, wanted to show what made Captain America a hero were his values and beliefs, and wanted to show how Steve Rogers standing for his values defined him as a hero, to the point where he would basically give up that costume and somebody else would be wearing that costume, and that someone was John Walker. Now, John Walker was a guy who was cut from the cloth of the 1980s. He was similar to action heroes such as Rambo, John McClane from Die Hard, and guys like Joe the American Ninja, in that he was brash, assertive, and cocky. And as he was the super patriot, he was the first to challenge Captain America. And as he challenged Captain America, he eventually was the one that the commission recruited to be the new Captain America. However, as John Walker wound up being made into Captain America, he wound up feeling a bit overwhelmed as he started to become more Captain America, and his emotions got to take more control over him over time. And after the left-winger and right-winger wound up revealing his identity, this led to the Watchdogs murdering his parents, and this is what led to John Walker eventually becoming the Crazed Cap. The Crazed Cap, who just basically went berserk over time, murdering his opponents. And as he murdered his opponents, he participated in the actions similar to 1980s action movies. But those actions basically show how he was unfit for the role of Captain America and unfit for the role of being Captain America. And that's where we see that John Walker, again, as a hero, wasn't really working out, but that was deliberate because that was all behind the conspiracy of the Red Skull, who wanted to discredit the image and reputation of Captain America. And over the course of Captain America's Captain America No More, the Captain storyline, we eventually see who is in charge as related to this whole situation, and that leads to Captain America 3 issue number, volume 1, number 350, which is the climax of the storyline. And in that comic, we basically see possibly one of the inspirations for that iconic Batman number 497 splash page, where Bane broke the back of Batman, and in that panel, we see the Red Skull picking up one of the henchmen dressed up as Captain America and breaking his back over his knee. And that's where I say that the Knightfall storyline is basically a derivative of Captain America No More / the Captain, because the Captain America No More storyline, again, does all of this brilliantly and basically defines Captain America during Mark Gruenwald's run, and shows us why Steve Rogers is a hero, and shows us why what Steve Rogers stands for as related to truth and justice is important to the Marvel Universe. And that's what the DC editors possibly saw and used as their inspiration as they were looking to go out here and participate in another deconstructed storyline, which was the trend in the 1980s and the 1990s. Deconstructing heroes was a big thing in the 80s and the 90s, and it had been done with other Marvel heroes, such as Thor during the Walt Simonson run. It had been done with Iron Man during the second time he became an alcoholic, and eventually led to him wearing the Silver Centurion armor as he came back. It was also done with Spider-Man with the symbiote costume, and also done with the Grey Hulk, and led to big sales for Marvel overall, and DC basically wanting to try to get some of those sales coming out of two things. One, they were coming out of the Crisis of Infinite Earths and really starting up a new Earth for DC's heroes. So they were coming out of that, and then we were also coming out of the whole death of Superman, where they also generated big sales. So they wanted to go out here and keep the sales momentum going. And since they wanted to keep the sales momentum going, what they did was come up with this gimmick event, because gimmicks were a big thing in the late 80s and early 90s. Gimmick storylines like the Infinity Gauntlet, gimmick storylines like the Smart Hulk event again emerging, and all these other different storylines. Gimmick storylines basically got people's attention, and they wanted to keep eyeballs focused on DC Comics, and the way they did that after the death of Superman was come out here with the Knightfall storyline. And the Knightfall storyline, again, was basically all about making Batman focus on this derivative gimmick that they basically stole from Captain America No More, the Captain, and focus on having Batman take on this villain, Bane, who they created to be a Bane, which was, again, a threat to Batman, because the word Bane means that something is something that bothers someone, and have this guy who's addicted to this venom basically use his venom powers to basically smash up Arkham Asylum, so all the villains can come out and Batman can take on all of those villains in this big storyline, which was one basically designed to go out here and be an entry point for new readers, and also introduce all the readers to all of Batman's rogues gallery as he was taking them on before confronting Bane, and then have Batman take on Bane, this big new villain who was going to be a huge threat as related to being, again, a guy who could psychologically look to outsmart Batman and had the physical strength to overpower him. That was the big gimmick for this Bane character. And this Bane character, basically, again, over the course of the storyline, basically is watching and having his henchmen like Zsasz basically watching Batman get worn down. And as they're watching Batman get worn down, eventually Bane has a confrontation with Batman where, again, he eventually overpowers him and then winds up breaking his back over his knee. Now, this whole storyline was basically made to, again, continuing to generate sales because Batman was already red hot. He had been red hot from the period of about 1988 all the way up until about 1992, and that was due to the Batmania that went on from the Tim Burton 1989 Batman movie. I was in high school at the time when they had the Batman movie out. And you couldn't find Batman comics on the shelf. They're basically selling like hotcakes. And Batman comics were already hot already because we had great storylines in the 80s, like the 10 Nights of the Beast. We had Year One. And then we had books like A Death in the Family, where they killed Jason Todd. And after having these big storylines be a part of Batman, people were just running to buy Batman like crazy. And on top of that, you had the Batman movie going on. And as the Batman movie was going on, we had storylines like A Lonely Place of Dying, where after Batman went solo in 88, as related to the death of Robin, we have the introduction of Tim Drake. And the introduction of Tim Drake showing how he was a detective basically was one of those things that was going to lead to the new Robin. And as that was going on, we had Batman basically red hot. And it was not only red hot because we had legendary writers like Jim Starlin and the late Jim Aparo working on Batman, but we also started to see the introduction of a new creative team, which was the late Alan Grant and Norm Breyfogle, and they came on to DC Comics, Batman through Detective Comics. I remember buying books from them from 1989 and 1990 and 91 and 92, because I was in high school at the time. And again, I basically started picking up these books with Norm Breyfogle and art and Alan Grant stories. And Norm Breyfogle's art was so unique and distinct. I mean, it was just absolutely fantastic. You have to be there to just look at Norm's art and see Alan Grant's just great storylines, because Alan basically did a great job of developing Batman as he was working with a new partner. Not to mention you had Chuck Dixon working on the Robin miniseries and basically developing Tim Drake as a character. And all of this was happening, and again, making Batman red hot, so that if you went to the newsstand or to comic shops like Forbidden Planet, I mean, Batman was basically selling red hot, and we were getting great books again with the regular Batman book, because Jim Aparo was just again still knocking it out as he was working. He's been working on comics for over 20 years at the time, and then we got Norm Breyfogle and Alan Grant again knocking it out, making masterpiece comics. And as this is going on, basically Batman sales are at all-time highs, up there with X-Men and Spider-Man. I mean, Batman, I think, was selling again in the high six figures at the time. X-Men was doing 1 million sales a month. Spider-Man was doing 1 million a month. Hulk was doing 1 million a month. I mean, this Batman was red hot at the time. And with the death of Superman, DC saw that they had made big numbers as related to Superman sales, which were really already hot. So they wanted to keep the momentum going, and that's the main reason why we got the Knightfall storyline. The Knightfall storyline was just one big sales gimmick. It was one big sales gimmick to keep the sales going on Batman, which was, again, we were coming out of not only 89's Batman, but Batman Returns. And again, with there being no movies for a while, they wanted to keep the heat going. And they keep the heat going with the Knightfall storyline. And the Knightfall storyline got people really excited because this would be the first time that Bruce Wayne wouldn't be Batman, but it wasn't the first time that Batman had been broken. No, it wasn't the first time Batman had been broken. This is something that me and my brother talked about as related to things, because we all knew the storyline about Ra's al Ghul. We knew that Ra's al Ghul was the first to actually go out here and break the Batman during the Neil Adams era, and Bruce basically came back from Ra's al Ghul, so we knew that the Bane storyline really wasn't anything to get worked up about. But a lot of people who hadn't been reading Batman ever since the 70s didn't know what that was, and many people from the 80s who had not read Captain America No More, the Captain, didn't know what was going on. And since they didn't know what was going on, what they did was think, oh, this was some major event, and that Batman getting his back broken by Bane was such a big thing. But no, if you just read Captain America Volume 1, number 350, you could easily see that this was something that was derivative. And again, derivative because Batman getting his back broken by Bane is the same thing as the final panel as related to Red Skull dispatching of several hirelings but picking this last one up, who basically is shocked seeing all the carnage that the Red Skull has participated in, murdering all of these Captain America lookalikes as related to making a mockery of America and having 5 fruits and vegetables a day, and he takes 5 lives a day. I mean, that's what he was saying. That's what he is doing, because the character of the Red Skull hates America, and that's basically where they got the idea for Knightfall, as I see it. That's just how I basically see it. And again, I wasn't impressed back then by the Knightfall storyline, and I basically, after reading how John Walker did things, I could easily see where they were going with John Paul Valley, because John Paul Valley is nothing more than a rehash John Walker. I mean, they came up with the Sword of Azrael storyline, which was a great book overall. Those were 4 great issues that introduced this character. But this character was basically Gotham's version of John Walker, in that he took things to extremes. They said he was programmed by the system, which is basically, John Walker was a guy who basically loved America but came up in a different era. And John Paul Valley was the same thing as John Walker, and somebody looking to go to extremes. But extremes are not the way of Batman, who is a Dark Knight, who follows a code and doesn't use guns or killing, nor does Bruce Wayne go out here and act irrationally and impulsively like John Paul Valley did. No, Bruce Wayne is a detective, and he basically uses his detective skills to go out here and solve crimes as he's looking to, again, strike fear and terror into people. And what they wanted to say was that John Paul Valley's approaches, which basically are the same approaches as 80s action heroes, are the same as John Paul Valley and John Walker, but they are not the approaches of Batman or Captain America. And that's where Knightfall basically, while a lot of people see it as an iconic storyline, I just see it as a basic, generic, and derivative storyline that really just is another storyline as related to the character. I mean, it's nowhere on the level of Flash, The Return of Barry Allen, which I see as a masterpiece. I mean, that is one of Mark Waid's greatest works, is The Return of Barry Allen, because it just basically shows how the Reverse Flash basically is so obsessed with Barry Allen that he basically shows us why Wally West is distinct as the Flash, and why Wally West carrying on the legacy of the Flash is important. I mean, Flash Return of Barry Allen is 10 times better than Knightfall, and it's just, when I look at Knightfall, it's just, again, like Death of Superman, just a cash grab story, whereas when I look at Captain America No More, the Captain, it, like Flash The Return of Barry Allen, is a masterpiece as related to comic storytelling, and sadly, a lot of people don't really see how great those storylines are, because they get caught up in the fanfare and the gimmick of Bane, and Bane being the one who broke Batman's back. But Batman getting his back broken by Bane doesn't have as much emotional resonance as the Red Skull going out here and looking to break that guy's back. and again making a mockery of Captain America, looking to destroy his name and his legacy. I mean, Captain America No More, again, a masterpiece of a storyline, and is far superior in every way to Knightfall. Now, Knightfall may have the more popular character, but Captain America No More and Flash: The Return of Barry Allen have far better storylines and are just, again, a far better story experience. And that's the way I see it as someone who grew up in the 80s and the early 90s with these stories. Again, grew up with these stories and know what they are. And since I know what they are, I can look at these stories. And again, the viewer wanted to know what my thoughts on Knightfall were. But Knightfall, to me, again, just a generic derivative story that was just made to, again, be a cash grab because DC saw Death of Superman do well. But if they had taken the time and just developed stories organically, the way they did what Mark Waid did with The Flash, they could have had a masterpiece in their hands. Because what's funny is that a year later, Paul Dini and Bruce Timm in Batman the Animated Series did their own story on Bane and basically treated Bane like a WWE jobber and basically showing, yeah, Bane had all this big master plan, but Bruce basically just slices the Batarang, puts his Batarang into Bane's Venom injector and basically easily beats Bane. Same thing with Doomsday in an episode of Justice League Unlimited. Superman basically jobs out Doomsday real easy, showing how Paul Dini and Bruce Timm basically viewed these characters, which were presented to be big-time threats in the comics, but were basically treated like a pair of clowns, by seasoned writers who could basically see the weaknesses in these characters. Now, again, I still enjoyed Batman Knightfall. I mean, I read Batman 500 till the cover came off. But again, it's not a book that stays with me the way Captain America No More, the Captain, did. No, when it comes to Captain America No More, the Captain, that I consider to be a master class in storytelling. And when it comes to Flash: Return of Barry Allen, I consider that to be a master class in storytelling as related to the deconstructed story model. And the deconstructed story model in and of itself, again, it was big during that time. And these are two textbook examples of how fantastic it is, but Death of Superman and Knightfall are just meh in my eyes. They're just not that good. But when I consider, again, to be great comics are, again, Captain America No More. And if you read Captain America No More, you'll be looking at that comic, and then you look at Knightfall with a side eye and realize Batman getting his back broken is nothing compared to the Red Skull, and that the Red Skull and Captain America No More wanted you to read more Captain America, but with Batman, after Knightfall ended and the Knight's End thing ended, the whole book basically started to fall apart. But Grunwald's run was far superior, and again, I look at this whole thing with, again, Knightfall, and again, I didn't lose many nights' sleep over Knightfall. No, there were just far too many great comics out in the 90s for me to get excited about that one. Now, my first full comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, is available right now on Lulu in paperback, and you can pick up a paper copy for the same price people paid for that book in 2022 when I had it on Kickstarter. And now there's a digital version of John Haynes at Death's Door on Amazon.com, and you can get that comic for just $3.99 right now. And if you want to pick up my other digital comic, Esteem No Good Deed, you can find that comic on Kindle and for 99 cents. And you can also find it in the back of the Esteem series book, Esteem Blast from the Past. And if you want to check out all the action-packed prose fantasy in the SJS Direct universe, you can find the books of the Isis series, the Esteem series, the John Haynes series, the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, Spellbound, the legendary Mad Matilda and Spinsterella, and other fantasy books such as Eternal Night. You can find all those books in paperback and Kindle format on Amazon.com, and you can also find them at other online booksellers in paperback like Barnes & Noble and Books A Million, and you can also find them at other digital booksellers like Draft the Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. Now, this was a video requested by a viewer, and if you want to request a video, you can send a donation for a minimum of $15 to the PayPal or the Cash App, and if I know something about that subject, I will make that video for you. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Esteem Horror in the Hamptons, The aspiring angel tries to escape a house of horrors in this action-packed, all-new Esteem series adventure. Get your copy of Esteem, Horror in the Hamptons in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Dark Incubus. The goddess next door gets enthralled in a romantic entanglement with an evil incubus in this all-new Isis series adventure. Get your copy of Isis, Dark Incubus in paperback and e-readers today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.